Okay, viewers, this is Dr. James Wondert speaking on Wednesday, the 1st of October 2025. And in my previous video, I was discussing firearms and, in particular, the hazardous effects from ionization type of firearms. And I'm going to take that issue further in this video. And I came to the conclusion uh, that obviously, as there are two types of firearms, modern firearms available, two or three anyway. The main ones being ionization type of firearms, which are obviously a radioactive hazard by emitting alpha particles, and the other two are photo electric firearms and multi-sensor firearms. And they're much safer, the latter two I've just mentioned. And I've recommended uh, substitution of firearms for either multi-sensor firearms or photoelectric type of firearms, and removal of ionization type of firearms, which do pose a kind of a health risk. And like I've mentioned in my particular case, I've observed thinning of the hair and also sometimes occasionally coughing syndromes. I can't definitely confirm that without tests, but from my observations, there seems to be a clear evidence there. Since I've been in supported housing for the homeless, where there have been these sort of fire alarms fitted as standard in the bedrooms for your safety, of course, I've observed that effect, and I wasn't this hairless ever before. Or never did I have that kind of occasional coughing syndrome. And just to prove it, for my siblings, I've got a younger brother who's a year younger, and he doesn't have any hair loss. And I've also got an older brother, about 6 years older than me, and he doesn't have any hair loss either, like this. So my hair loss is quite severe, and he's actually had a chemotherapy as well. That's the older brother, and his hair's grown back, and he's not like this. Put it that way, not as thin hair on the top as me. So that's why it's all the more important to mention this. And it seems like the two match this the fact that I'm in supported housing with these firearms. Most likely, almost certainly, ionization type of standard firearms fitted. I can't confirm that yet, but that will be confirmed later on. Obviously, I have sent letters and messages to my housing support providers, and obviously it's down to them. But legal issues wise, obviously they're not going to do anything until they're obliged legally to do something. But I've just recommended that they just maybe substitute them. That's all I've said at the moment. If there is a need for them in the bedroom, that is, obviously in certain parts of the house, the hallway, the kitchen, and above, obviously you definitely need maybe those firearms. But maybe I'd argue against maybe the personal bedroom. But if you do have to have it in the bedroom, can you make sure that they are kind of the modern ones that are photoelectric firearms or multi-sensor firearms, for instance? That's what I did recommend. If you do have to have them in the room and you're living in that confined space, don't forget breathing that same air, just like in a cabin in an aircraft. And those alpha particles, ionizing alpha particles, you're breathing them in as well. If it's a closed room, especially where my last day was, the windows didn't even open there. So I spent about 6 or 7 months in that place in Walsgrove Road prior to this place, and that house had a room where there was a fire alarm similar to this one, and I'm assuming it was an ionizing uh, fire alarm. And most cheap firearms are ionizing type ones. Just out of interest, I've let my viewers know. Modern ones, that is, unless you go for the photoelectric ones or multi-sensor ones. And that's where I observed the effect in my previous location, the thinning of the hair. And I was actually in an enclosed room, airtight almost. The windows didn't open, the patio doors were shut and shut tight. You couldn't open them, and they were sealed up. Only way of getting fresh air is getting out of the room. So that was my last location. Fortunately, these windows do open slightly, but that's still not the end of the issue. So there's still a bit of risk there when the windows are shut. And like I said, there could be emitting alpha particles. Americium, that's the radioactive material used in most modern uh, ionization photo, not photo, ionization fire alarms. That's the material used, the radioactive material used, and this is how they justify their sale of the product. I think on health and safety issues, they've been approved uh, by comparison with the background radiation in certain parts of the country. For instance, they would argue that for places like, for instance, like Cornwall and other places where the natural background radiation is quite significantly higher than average, they would argue on that sort of basis, and that's how they actually get their sales through and get their items approved as safe to sell, and that's how they make the money as well. Just like drugs, and you've seen that classic fugitive movie, that drug Valproic, which was approved by the FDA, the American Food and Drug Administration, by Dr. Nichols, and obviously it was known to cause liver sample failure and damages like that. And those test results weren't let out, and obviously that was the whole corruption behind that drug. And they needed to sell the drug, and they proved it. Obviously, even though it was known to cause that effect in that film. That's a fictitious film. Obviously, there are real life cases of certain drugs being sold, just like the COVID drugs, if you can remember the AstraZeneca drug, and obviously they do clear them. The drug administration, if not the American Food and Drug Administration over there, they're cleared, and obviously a lot of money is at stake, and obviously money is to be made, and by selling those products, so they have to get the clearance, don't they, and the safety clearance that they're safe to sell, or for instance, if they're a food product or a drug product is safe to consume. And in a fire alarm case, obviously that they're not hazardous in terms of anything else, any other effects such as ionization, radiation, the effects of that, obviously. So they clear it, but I would dispute that, and I would argue that they are using obviously the argument that in certain parts of the country you would experience more natural background radiation than say these fire alarms. That's how they get it clear. Just like your mobile phone, it's got a SAR value, a specific absorption rate, and a certain value or threshold is deemed as safe. And obviously, if your handset is above that threshold, then it's not really deemed as a safe product. It emits kind of dangerous levels of electromagnetic radiation. But mobile phones, on the incidentally, don't emit ionizing radiation. This is a different form. This is they actually emit non-ionization radiation. So that's a different matter. But still, they cause effects that do damage um, the health, of course, and obviously, ionization radiation does damage DNA, and that's the effect here that we're talking about, damaging DNA, etc., and obviously damage to the person or the living person inside. In a closed room with a fire alarm like that, for instance, if it is an ionization type of fire alarm, and obviously, like I said, it's been approved with those arguments, uh, natural background radiation, and obviously even nuclear power stations and certain places of occupation, certain hazardous occupations, like if you're working in a hospital and you're a radiographer, X-raying people, etc., whatever, your chances of background radiation will be higher, and obviously people do wear photographic radioactive badges to measure that, etc. The radioactivity that they are obviously under monitoring when they are working, say, dangerous occupations like nuclear power plant workers, like even for instance Homer Simpson. Obviously, he works at fictitious cartoon character. He works at that Springfield nuclear power station with Mr. Burns, if you can recall, as the manager there, and obviously he's lost his hair. He's only got two M's on his ear. That's just an example there, and that's the background radiation he's experienced. Obviously, that's clear proof of the background radiation. from a hazardous occupation. I must admit, obviously. But this is not an occupation here. I'm not working in a nuclear power station necessarily. This is just standard fire alarms and ionization type of fire alarms in particular that I'm talking about, and the risks that they pose. And I think that they are kind of attributable to my hair loss. And like I said, in my family, my siblings, that is, I'm talking about, not older parents and grandparents, anything else. They seem to have their hair. They've still got their hair, and older one and the younger one, and I'm the one in the middle. So, and I'm the one who's lost the most. And I haven't worked on a nuclear power station, by the way, so I can't explain that obviously. But those are cleared. Those fire alarms are cleared through the British Safety Board, the Kite Mark, etc. They do get clearance like that, and they obviously justify it by their sales. They are usually the cheapest form of fire alarms on sale. That's one other thing to consider, and within affordability range for most people. But the ones that are the safest are the photoelectric ones, photoelectric fire alarms, and also the multi-sensor fire alarms, which don't pose that effect, that hazardous effect from harmful effects of radioactivity, whether it's alpha particles, etc. Like from the material source that they normally use is Americium, radioactive material emitting alpha particles in that ionization chamber of the fire alarm itself. But in the contained space, obviously, I would argue you're breathing that same air, and then if the windows don't open, it could be causing damage to you. And like I said, ionizing radiation does damage DNA, and that's my message here. So maybe they should start replacing them, just like chlorofluorocarbons. If you can remember, the 1980s were known to damage the ozone layer, and they had a ban on chlorofluorocarbons in aerosols, etc. And that did sort of come into a revolution which did reduce the ozone layer depletion quite significantly with the removal of chlorofluorocarbon based products on sale to everyday customers, etc., and even in certain products, even refrigerants, etc. So the release of chlorofluorocarbons was attributable to the ozone layer depletion, for example. And similarly here, ionizing fire alarms, if they could be removed and substituted for safer ones, that would be much better option. I mean, obviously, if you do need to have them, and sometimes obviously you do need to have that health and safety for peace of mind from these fire alarms, and then I would recommend that substitution for the safer fire alarms. And similarly, like the Zeppelin helium airship, which was a disaster in New Jersey on the 6th of May 1937. That was a turning point for scientists and engineers as well. End of the hydrogen airships, because obviously hydrogen being very flammable, therefore very hazardous, and that resulted in like inert gases such as that are less flammable, for instance, helium airships, etc. So that sort of revolution. Again, they could use that same application analogy wise, for fire alarms. You don't want to end up with damaging DNA, with ionizing radiation fire alarms. So that's the point here. And I'll end this video. And do remember, even drugs, they're sometimes approved as well. It's just when there's money's at stake and they want to sell a product, sometimes they're in a rush to get it through, no matter how dangerous or unsafe it is. And you need to consider safety quite seriously, and not always profit and money. That's the message here. And there are alternatives, safe alternatives. So that's the bottom line here. So you don't have to do away with the product, the type of protection you get from a product like that, a fire alarm. You can also always substitute for a safer version. That's all I'm saying here. Dr. James, Dr. James on Dutch on 1st of October 2025 in my personal bedroom via supported housing for the homeless in Coventry, West Midlands area of England, UK, on the 52nd parallel north.